All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really cool legal idea, something that's basically the conscience of the law itself. It's called equity. So let's kick things off with a question that really gets to the core of what justice is all about. What happens when a rule is followed perfectly, but the result is just completely unfair? What do you do then? Well, that exact dilemma, that gap between the strict letter of the law and what feels right, wasn't just some minor issue. It was such a big deal that it led to one of the greatest inventions in legal history. And that invention is equity. Now, the name comes from the Latin word for fairness, equitas, which makes sense. But in the legal world, it's not just a vague feeling of fairness. Oh no, it's a whole body of law designed to step in when the normal, rigid rules are just too blunt an instrument. Okay, to get why equity was such a game changer, you've got to understand the problem it was created to fix. We're talking about times when the law itself actually creates injustice. So picture the early English common law as a super strict, unbending rule book. And look, having clear rules is good, right? It gives you consistency. But here's the thing, life isn't neat and tidy. It's messy. And that rigid rule book, it just couldn't handle every single weird, complicated human situation that walked into a courtroom. And this set up a really sharp contrast. On one hand, you've got the common law. It's rigid, formal, predictable, but man, it could be harsh. And on the other hand, you have equity popping up. It's flexible, it's personal, and its main goal is to make sure the outcome is actually fair for the people involved. And here's the real kicker. You could follow the common law rules to the absolute letter and still end up with a result that was obviously totally unfair. It was a massive blind spot in the system, a place where justice could just slip through the cracks. So, how did they fix this? If the law itself is the problem, where do you turn? Well, the answer came from the very top. We're talking about the king. This is pretty cool because it shows you how this all happened, step by step. First, if you felt you got a raw deal from the courts, you'd go straight to the king and ask for mercy. But the king, he's busy running a kingdom, so he starts handing these petitions off to his most trusted advisor, the chancellor. And pretty soon there are so many of these cases that the chancellor's office basically turns into its own court, the court of chancery. And just like that, you get this really wild situation. For centuries, England literally had two different court systems operating at the same time. You had the common law courts for the strict rules, and then you had the court of chancery to handle all the cases that needed, well, a little fairness. So we're moving on to law's moral assistant. But what does that even mean? What was equity's actual job? How did it work next to the super powerful common law? Okay, here's the most important thing to get about this. Equity wasn't designed to just replace the law. It wasn't there to throw out the entire rule book. Nope. It had a totally different job. A much more subtle, and you could even say more clever job. Its whole purpose was to work with the law, not fight against it. And hey, don't just take my word for it. There was this famous case back in 1705 that put it perfectly. The court said, equity does not destroy the law, nor create it, but assist it. It's a helper, not a replacement. So how does it assist? Well, this is how. It qualifies, it moderates, it reforms. Basically, it takes the rigor, hardness, and edge of the law and just softens it. Think of it as sanding down the sharp corners of the law to get a just result. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter, a tale of two systems. We've got these two powerful legal systems running side by side. So how does this story end? Well, here's the funny thing. Over time, the Court of Chancery, the place that was created to be flexible, it started getting gummed up with its own rules and procedures. After hundreds of years, it kind of became the very thing it was designed to fight, a rigid, complicated system. And this timeline gives you a great snapshot of the whole journey. You can see it being formally set up way back under Edward III. Then, bam, that key moment in 1705 where its job gets defined. And then, fast forward to the late 1800s, and you see the big finale, the Judicature Acts, which changed everything. So these Judicature Acts fused the two systems. What does that mean? It means they got rid of the two separate courts. They were merged. So now any judge could apply principles from both the common law and equity. They had the whole toolkit in one courtroom. Which brings us to a really interesting final question. Now that law and equity are in the same courtroom, does fairness still have a special voice? Or has the spirit of equity, that flexible, personal sense of justice, been kind of swallowed up by the very rulebook it was supposed to help? Something to think about, for sure.